All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our June webinar. Can you believe that we've already hit halfway through the year? I can't, and halfway through the month. It feels like I just turned 40 and I'm on my way downhill very, very quickly. So thank you, everybody, for the great wishes. We're very fortunate to share my personal birthday month along with TVDM's birthday month, as well as that of ZDFin with Michael Schaefer. So on that note, we thought it would only be the right thing to do to re-invite Michael to have a chat with us. I remember that Michael was, I think, our first or our second co-host when we first started out in 2020. And I kick myself every time I think about it because that was before my lovely team would remind me to press record. So we ended up going almost 3/4 of the way through a webinar and then realized that we hadn't recorded it. Ridiculous. So today I definitely remember to do that. A copy of the recording as well as Michael's details and any cases or adjudication orders or any references to any legislation that we're talking about will be posted along with the recording during the course of next week. So on that note, I'd like to just do a quick intro to Michael. Michael in this industry needs no formal introduction. He's been around for years and years. ZDFin has grown from strength to strength. I've recently seen a post of Nicola where you started with 4 employees and now you've got 54. It was 54, 56, somewhere around that number, which is
54. That's
54.
horrible.
Payroll day is a tough one, I can
No,
imagine.
no, it's horrible.
Yeah, and it's really fantastic people and people that have been in the industry for many years and people that are very passionate about the industry. So Michael will tell you a little bit more about ZDFin and ZenTech and the service offerings that they have. And then, of course, you know who we are. Today, we're going to be chatting about a couple of myths in the community scheme space. And any of you that have any suggestions of anything that you'd like to add, please feel free to add that or to mention it. So when I say myth, I'm speaking about something that we think happens in the community scheme space where it actually doesn't, or some resolution that's required where in fact it's not required. So if we forget any, please do let us know. Carl, I'm going to hand over to you just to do a couple of announcements for us, and then Michael, Carl will hand over to you, and then we can sort of bounce between you and me. I know we chatted about one or two, and I think maybe we can start off with the role of the executive managing agent, and then we can deal with some financial issues, and then we can chat about a couple of other things. So, Carl, over to you.
Thanks, Zerlinda. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Just a few marketing announcements. As Zerlinda mentioned, this webinar will be recorded and published on our website as well as our YouTube channel, and a copy of the recording will also be emailed to you. And then if you can also please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like the video. Then if you haven't done already, please do sign up to our newsletter. This way you can keep in touch with the TVDM Consultants team. Then in terms of our upcoming events, the next Let's Get Physical will be taking place on the 25th of June at the Mount Edgecombe in KZN. So I'll add a link in the chat if anyone would like to register. And then lastly, our neighborhood live discussion will be happening Friday the 27th at 9 a.m. And please note that this feature is only available to our paid for members. So if you'd like to upgrade your current package or subscribe to our neighborhood, please pop me an email. But I'll add all the relevant links in the chat. Right, thanks. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay, cool. So thanks very much, Zerlinda, and welcome to everyone. Thanks very much. It's certainly an honor to share a birthday with you, Zerlinda. And fun fact, it's my 5 years ZDFin, and I'm turning 50 at the end of August. So that's 10 years above you. So I think it's only going uphill.
Spring chicken.
Zerlinda, definitely not downhill.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Okay, cool. So where should we start? Some common myths. Let's look at if we look at the EMA, I mean, I think everyone knows we're quite passionate about the EMA service and offering. I really do think it's a non-brainer, irrespective of who provides the actual capability. I think it adds huge amount of value and benefit to schemes. And I think just one of the common sort of myths is that, the EMA replaces the managing agent. We still find that, actually with the very big sort of well-known managing agents in KwaZulu-Natal, they almost thought that, we were going to sort of usurp them and take over the full sort of managerial function. So, again, I think that, our position is quite clear. The EMA assumes the roles and the responsibilities of the trustees. And exactly like the trustees appoint a third-party managing agent to assist with administrative work, financial management, disseminations, collections, etc., so we appoint a third-party managing agent, and I think it gives a very nice segregation of, duty and responsibility, and sort of two brains, for lack of a better word, working in partnership to the collective benefits of the scheme. I think it only sort of adds value, and while another point is just on that is that, while practically or theoretically, not practically, theoretically, while it's relatively easy to get rid of the EMA, just via special resolution terminating the services and then appointing a board of trustees. If you've got one party that controls all functions, typically we know the managing agent is the custodian of all that information. So, we have seen cases where we've been approached where an EMA has been appointed and, they just ignore the members' request to hold a meeting. They don't divulge any information because we know everyone likes to hide behind Poppy. And, the members are kind of stuck in and can't sort of extricate from the arrangement. So, yeah, we feel having a third party managing agent is definitely the correct sort of like setup, and that's the way we operate. So I think that's just one sort of myth that I wanted to sort of disband. And then just on that, having trustees within EMA, so it is mutually exclusive. But having said that, you always have interested persons involved in the management of a scheme. And, also bearing in mind, I think it's, everyone would appreciate it'd be disingenuous to think that a new party could come in, and just hit the road running. So you always need sort of access to the proverbial memory bank and kind of context and information. And, the very first scheme we've took on, we're still quite actively involved. We go once a month. It's the gardening committee that we meet with, look at the succulents, have coffee, and they also provide very good context and insights
Yeah.
in terms of what's happening on the ground and what we should know about and what we need to, investigate and, progress for them amongst sort of everything else. So yeah, that's one on the EMA side.
Yeah, awesome. And then something else that we deal with, luckily not too frequently when it comes to executive managing agents, Michael, if you'd like to comment on it, is that if you're not able to get the special resolution to appoint an executive managing agent, you can approach the Community Scheme Ombud Service. But my understanding, and perhaps you're more directly involved than I am, when it comes to approaching CSOS, the parties don't have a choice as to the executive managing agent that they're wanting to appoint there. There seems to be a requirement to appoint an executive managing agent from the panel. Have you had any dealings with that or any experience with that?
So my understanding, well, CSOs kind of flip-flop like we know and change their minds on a fairly regular basis, but if they're not at the comrades. But I think that if they do the appointment, it'll be one of their panel. We are not on their panel for a number of reasons, but it would be a CSOS appointed EMA, because we have had schemes that have approached us in the past that wanted to go. Well, they were kind of forced to go the CSOS sort of route, and we put everything forward, but nothing's ever come of that. And I think then they've kind of tried to get sort of old trustees back, and but sort of cautious in terms of getting an untested EMA from CSOS's panel.
Yeah.
And actually, just I mean on that, I've got quite strong feelings about that. I think it's very unfair, of the CSOS to set up individuals as an EMA with no sort of experience and sort of expertise, or mainly sort of experience. I mean, it's a harsh industry. We all know what it's like. It's harsh.
Yeah.
And and even myself, we run it with a group of 10, 12 people. So it's not a one person. Not a one-person thing. We all know trustees, it's multiple sort of skill sets. And, I certainly don't profess to have all of those expertise, which is why I rely quite heavily on my colleagues, and it's a team effort and approach, exactly like a board of trustees.
Yeah.
With the varying sort of,
Yeah. And there is also a misconception that the executive managing agent can't be the managing agent, or the managing agent can't be the executive managing agent. I mean, my personal opinion is that it should be two separate entities. I know that that's your view as well, but the misconception is that it cannot be the same company, but we all know that it can be.
Yeah, it definitely can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is interesting how that works. Talking about a special resolution, something that comes up still quite frequently with us is that when you raise a special levy in a body corporate, you don't need a special resolution. It's only a trustee resolution that's required. And of course, you as the executive managing agent would make that decision just like the trustees would make. I do know that you always involve your members either formally or informally, but do you still get a lot of queries from owners that are quite surprised that that is something that the executive managing agent or the trustees can actually decide on?
Yes, we do. We do. But, because we believe in sort of like, open transparency, and as you say, even to our kind of detriment to a degree, just given the number of hours and kind of the time spent, when we press the proverbial, everyone's well sort of informed and is kind of like bought into the idea. So, so yes, there still is a little bit of misunderstanding, but yeah, I think that we don't have too much issue there, just given the way that we approach and engage, the schemes that we look after with
Yeah.
our third-party managing agents.
Yes. And then dealing with financials, two things that often come up when it comes to myths as well, myth busting, is that the audited financial statements don't need to, well, two things about the audited financial statements. Firstly, that the audited financial statements don't need to be presented at the annual general meeting, that they can be presented at a special general meeting. I've not seen an annual general meeting where the opportunity was not used to present the audited financial statements. But the reason for the introduction of that was to ensure that the AGM happens in time and that there isn't a delay waiting for the audited financial statements. And then the second thing about audited financial statements is that it doesn't need member approval. It is something that is approved by the trustees. And I suppose thinking about it, the third thing is that, well, we've got a very mixed bag of opinions in this regard, even in our offices, as to whether or not audited financial statements need to be presented to the members, signed by the trustees or unsigned, subject to a directive. So that's a mouthful about audited financial statements, but your comments on that, Michael?
I think they need to be presented, and I think they need to be signed by the trustees. So, I would never have an AGM without sort of audited financial statements. And, my feeling is the trustees must sign. It's all historic information which has been audited. It kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
So to ask member approval, I think is, it's kind of a fait accompli by that stage.
Exactly, yeah. Also, interestingly, another myth is that when it comes to the budget approval, technically a budget can only be approved or declined. We can no longer approve a budget subject to amendments. We have found a way around it is that we vote on it, accepting it subject to directives to the incoming trustees, like please go and look at this number, please go and look at that quote or whatever it might be. Have you dealt with a lot of meetings where members have been quite vocal in their proposed amendments to budgets?
Yes. So what we often do is have a separate budget meeting. So take it out of the AGM. So because then by the time you have your AGM 4 months post fact, if you're within the prescribed time, you're already a quarter of the way into the year. So very often what we do is we'll have an SGM prior to year end, so we can then set the budget, sort of timelessly and aligned to the new sort of financial year. And then, we find that works better. And then also it makes the AGM a lot easier because the budget can be very sort of hot and contentious. So, so we have a budget meeting, and depending on the scheme in question, if it's a very difficult or sort of hostile scheme, we might even have a non-official sort of budget meet just to, kind of get the opinions and sort of like whatnot.
Yeah.
So it depends. I mean, like everyone on this call knows, it's the converted here. It's no two schemes are exactly the same, and you need to treat them, you need to treat them as they need to be treated to kind of get it over the line.
Yeah.
But a lot of what we do, and everyone here will know, a lot of it is education. So if you take the time to explain the budget, and go through, and your levy is a function of your expense, and go through all the expenses and explain it, we don't generally get that much sort of like kickback. You always have the one or two people that have overstretched themselves, but the vast majority of people, I like to believe, are sort of rational, if you take the time to explain it to them. Ourselves not
Yeah.
much, but
Yeah. Rational at a particular point in time, depending on the circumstances. Again, dealing with financials, something that we still get often in meetings, and I kind of get a bit cross with it when I hear about it because I really can't find anything in law that requires it, is that members often want the auditor to be replaced or rotated because they believe that that would be the correct thing to do, or in terms of some or other type of regulation or requirement to change the auditor after X amount of time. I don't know if you've got a scheme where they've had the same auditor for years and years and years, or if they have auditors on rotation. I believe that until such time as the auditor is not providing the service anymore, or a proper service, they should remain.
Yeah, so we have seen that. We've actually seen that quite a lot recently of late, actually. So, but I mean, it's the members' sort of choice and discretion. So, they must choose. But I also agree, I don't think there's an issue having an auditor for an extended sort of period of time. And I agree, they need to be accountable in terms of their profession, and provided they're providing a service. I don't see an issue. But yeah, certainly if a scheme wants to rotate, that's their prerogative. And, yeah, we have seen that.
Yeah, yeah. And then in line with the auditor issue, we also have a misconception in the industry that there is a legal requirement that at least 3 quotes are obtained for any contractor. Is this something that you've also come into? I mean, sometimes there aren't even 3 contractors available to give a quote, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So that arises its head quite often as well.
Yeah, it does. And I remember back from my managing agent days, it felt like we were just quoting machines. People just are scared to make decisions. They want like 5 quotes or 3 quotes for, small amounts of 1,000, 2,000 rand, which is like nonsensical. So that's one of the big benefits of being the EMA. We kind of know what things should cost. We don't necessarily want the cheapest. We just want the best, the best quality at the best price, which isn't perhaps the cheapest. And if you're going to frustrate contractors, calling them out for small jobs, it ultimately sort of like catches up. So yeah, and I think, but that goes down to, members and, being scared to make decisions and lacking the confidence to, make decisions, in the
Especially with
best
large
interest.
amounts. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, especially with large amounts of money. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, I approached you yesterday evening or this morning about a potential matter for my scheme, and there we've been trying for years and years and years to get improvements relating to security. And it doesn't matter what you present, the answer is always no. But at the end of the day, the members want security, security, security. So it's a very difficult thing to decide on quotes and to decide on projects when large amounts of money are in question, especially when you're dealing with a lot of different personalities with members as well. Something else that comes up often is that in order to obtain quotes, a tender process has to be followed. I sometimes feel as though the body corporates are believing that they're like state-owned entities or something along those lines, that they have to have this full-on tender process. But we know in practice that the quote approval process can be quite informal. What is your recommendation to those online when it comes to getting quotes?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the scope of works that are required, and and the quantum involved. So if it's a small project, then I don't think one wants to sort of over engineer it. But likewise, if it's a large project, involving a lot of money, I think you do want sort of the correct sort of professional sort of advice, and you want a proper sort of process followed through. So I think it's kind of sort of dependent on the situation, the scope, the context of the work, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I mean, but it also goes back to trustees, very often lacking the confidence to make a decision. If it's a 20, 30 grand job, yeah, sure, you probably need 2 quotes or whatever the story is, with a trusted sort of contractor. Check references, check your business or risk covers, and all good things like that. But if it's like a 10, 15 million rand job, and it involved sort of like technical, sort of structural issues, I would want to have the likes of a NABA or a Project Lab or whoever, sort of holding my hand to make sure that we're making the right sort of like decision in the best interests of everyone. Spend a bit to save a lot down the line, to the benefits of all the members.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just sort of depends.
One of the things that I enjoyed the most about my time as a managing agent, and it's something that you get to enjoy every single day, is just having had the experience of dealing with a similar project in so many different schemes that you know what will work, what won't work, which contractor to use, which contractor not to use, which amounts are, reasonable and not. As a managing agent, you sit in so many different meetings, and you'll go to one meeting where they've just installed security cameras, then you'll go to another meeting where they're thinking about installing security cameras, and another meeting where they're moving away from security cameras, or when one contractor is used here and a very good job is done, and then the same contractor is used somewhere different. So that was one of the things I enjoyed doing. I see even in our consulting practice that very often we are involved in these discussions as professional trustee, or even just in a consultation. And it's great to be able to make use of that experience and be like, I've seen this done in another scheme. I would recommend that you go this route or that route. It's one of the things that I think makes your company as special as what it is, that you've got that experience, that group of contractors that is known and trusted, that you can just get in and get the job done. We were at our trustee meeting yesterday evening, and I thought to myself, oh my word, I'd love to get Michael in here. He'd just get everything done. Just get it done. We'd save so much time debating and getting quotes and all of those fun things. So it's nice to be able to get things done. Something that I feel quite passionate about, or at least an opinion that I feel quite passionate about, so I hope that you agree with me, Michael, is that a lease agreement of a common property needs a special resolution of the members. So a myth in the industry is that you could have leases entered into by trustee resolution, like a first come, first serve parking bay, or something along those lines. It used to be a trustee resolution under the old act. It's a special resolution, and technically it's a special resolution per owner or occupier per lease agreement. I have sort of mellowed in my old age and have allowed a special resolution to be taken to mandate the trustees in regard to the entering into of leases over common property. But we still hear almost on a daily basis where common property is being let out without a formal resolution in place. What is your view on that?
No, I do agree with you, Zerlinda. And
Awesome.
we pick up a lot. We pick up a lot of. You pick up a lot of that when we take on schemes, and generally the older the scheme, the more issues that you've got to then try and sort of pick up. And then it's a question of just trying to regularize, what kind of is in place, which I think is to the benefit of everyone. I think, it just increases, the value of the units if it's well run, everything's run according to the acts and the legislation. And then it just sort of, guards against, that one difficult new owner who comes in and then starts attacking you on a technical point, which then leads to a lot of unpleasantness and unhappiness to, kind of all owners, which is unnecessary, But yeah, and a lot of the time, the decisions can be made, very well meaning, just, not knowing, what is sort of legally required. So yeah, so I definitely do agree with you, and we do see that a lot.
Yeah.
Especially everything with common property. It's, the de facto EUAs and extensions, and the older the scheme, the more the issue. It's that simple.
I saw Aubrey jumped on the call earlier. One of the ones that come up often as well is that there is no such thing as a de facto exclusive use area. So just because you're using it all around it or a gate does not mean it is an exclusive use area. So that's definitely myth busted. And then another thing that comes up often is what an extension of a section is. So when somebody maybe does something to the exclusive use area and they believe that it's simply an alteration or an improvement to the exclusive use area, when it in fact is an extension of a section. Alternatively, things that come up often is mezzanine levels in units. The myth is that it's not an extension of a section, where in fact it is, because you're increasing the floor area. I'm sure Aubrey's got a couple of stories there as well. And I'm sure as part of your compliance, when you're taking over a scheme, that you get a lot of these areas of common property that's being used, or extensions of sections, or exclusive use areas that are used for something else, the whole change of use element as well. So that comes up very often. That makes me think about the definition of a unanimous resolution. There is also a misconception that a unanimous resolution is an 80% vote. It is not. It's 100% vote of an 80% quorum, or 100% vote of all the owners. And that there is no difference between the written consent of all owners versus unanimous resolutions. I think the wording unanimous is kind of misleading. The written consent of all owners is just that. It's the written consent, whereas a unanimous resolution can be taken at a meeting. Michael, what has your experience been when it comes to the taking of unanimous resolutions? I can't remember when last I went to a meeting where a unanimous resolution was actually achieved simply because of quorum, let alone the vote.
Yeah, so quorum is always an issue. Quorum is always an issue. So we actually did one, 2 weeks ago, at a new HIA actually that we're helping from a compliance perspective. And there, yeah, we just didn't have the quorum. So very few. I mean, I could probably count on my hand the number of unanimous resolutions that I've seen sort of successfully passed. Quorum being the biggest issue, and then obviously the agreements amongst the owners. So yeah, you don't see too many. Yeah, I don't know everyone else's experience. It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. Pop your thumbs up if you've dealt with the unanimous resolution in the last while, or put something in the chat. It'd be interesting. I think we did a poll on that Facebook group a little while ago, sectional title living in South Africa, but I think it was a very low number of people that actually achieved a unanimous resolution. The other thing that comes up often as well is that there's a myth that if you can't get your quorum the first time around, you can simply table the resolution at the adjourned meeting. So that's not true for a unanimous resolution. You always need an 80% quorum. You can only pass a special or ordinary resolution at an adjourned meeting. Then when it comes to adjourned meetings, something else that happens very often is that, let's say, for example, the venue or the meeting platform or something like that can't be available the next week at the same time, the same place. So the time shifts or the venue shifts or the method of engaging shifts. There's a misconception that that is allowed, whereas it is not. It does need a fresh notice to be sent out. I'm sure you've dealt with that situation in your many years in property management as well. We got into a stage when I was a managing agent of just booking the next week, booking yourself out, booking the venue just to play it safe, because in all likelihood you weren't going to get the quorum the first time around. I don't know how many times
Yeah,
you've
so
experienced that.
yeah, so sadly that's all too prevalent. You got to book the following week, and the bigger the scheme, the more the likelihood of having an adjourned meeting. So I think I think everyone on the call has had that experience.
Yeah.
Sadly a reality. I
Yeah.
mean, we've actually, it's actually one of my new fees that I've put into our EMA agreement. There's a punitive fee for no quorum now,
Love
which
it.
I think is fantastic. I think all managing agents have a punitive fee if members can't take the time and the trouble to pitch up to a meeting and
Yeah.
waste the managing agent's time. I feel
Yeah.
quite strongly about that.
I
And
remember.
actually, I've had so many arguments with clients that come on when they have a look at it, because we obviously run through it,
Yeah.
and they always point it out, And yeah, anyway.
No, but your experience is definitely worth it. I would definitely stick to that fee.
Yeah.
The thing that happens often as well is if the managing agent or the trustees engage with the owners and try to encourage them to come to the meeting or remind them of the meeting even, or ask them to please submit proxies, they get accused of proxy farming or proxy canvassing. I think it used to be a lot more prevalent when we could hold an unlimited amount of proxies.
Yeah.
But in fact, it very rarely was it about actually trying to push an agenda through. Most often it was about just being able to deal with it that evening and not have to come back the following
Yeah.
again. Another misconception is that proxy canvassing or proxy farming is dead. It very much is not, because you can have a power of substitution, you can bring a complete outsider into the meeting. So it is still possible, although a lot more complicated to do proxy farming. Talking about quotes and tenders and all those fun things, I often hear that if a trustee is the service provider, the trustee actually cannot offer that service, or that the body corporate can't use that service provider just because it happens to be owned by a trustee. The whole misconception about conflict of interest. So we know that just because a trustee owns the business or recommends the business doesn't mean that that business cannot be used or that service provider cannot be contracted. It simply means that when discussing it and when engaging and when appointing and when paying that service provider, that specific trustee with the conflict of interest needs to recuse themselves. Have you had many instances where an owner or trustee has approached you to say, hey, use my business, or many owners saying, don't use that trustee's business because it's owned by a trustee?
Yeah, so luckily not too many schemes. Yeah, luckily not too many schemes, but we have had it. And back, that was more back to the management days. And then we just try and encourage, if they're that good, to rather sort of, get work elsewhere as opposed to, in the scheme in question, because it often builds up a lot of resentment amongst the owners. And, whichever way you look at it, it's not an ideal sort of like situation. Luckily, as the EMA, we steer away from, any owner sort of capabilities, unless it makes sense, for for whatever reason. But then at least it's, by definition, the decision is impartial and sort of objective.
Yeah.
But it is difficult. It is difficult if you get like a pushy chairman, and it's like, yeah, it's difficult.
The list is growing and growing. I don't know, you probably have a couple on your side as well, Michael. So I'll do one more, well, two more, and then I'll keep quiet and we can maybe go to the floor and get a couple more suggestions. You speak about the chairperson. There's also a myth that the chairperson at a meeting has to be approved. So if the chairperson of the meeting is the chairperson of the trustees, there's no approval needed. And when it comes to an external person chairing a meeting, if a valid objection is raised, it would need to go to a vote. Have you ever had a situation where you have not been able to chair a meeting if you've been appointed to chair simply because somebody has had an objection or the members have voted against it?
I actually haven't.
I always threaten to say, hey, I'm going to stay here irrespective. So I'll be billing you to chair, I'll be billing you to stay, and that normally does the trick. And then the last one from my side is voting. So we've got such amazing platforms. We have Meeting Pal, we've got BCM Track, we've got Reconnect You. When it comes to voting, it's very interesting to me that when I still go to when I go to meetings, that I still have the request for a show of hands vote in a body corporate, or thumbs up. And my favorite, and I must say that I've implemented it once or twice depending on the scheme, is there any objection? The meeting is being recorded. I'm asking again, is there any objection? Okay, we're going to take it that there's no objection. Do you, and I'm going to ask for honesty, Michael, do you still sometimes run a meeting like that to say, is there any objection, or let's quickly see by an indication of hands, or are you good as gold and do voting cards for everything?
Really, we do sometimes just say, "Oh, there are no objections," depending on what on the nature of the vote. So, but by and large, we'll use a proper platform where the votes are taken sort of like correctly. But yeah, I can't profess to be innocent and say
Me
to
neither.
go the
Either.
converse. Yeah.
Yeah, you know where the problem comes in those years down the line when a vote gets challenged. Nicole Null and myself are busy on a matter now. It's actually due today, where I think like 20 something years ago, a decision was taken, but there's no record of the voting. And I think to myself, oh man, if only Meeting Pal were around then, that I'd be able to download the outcome of these votes, that it wouldn't be subject to challenge. Michael, any more that you'd like to raise before we go to the floor?
Maybe just the one that you especially see on the sectional title on Hendrik's group is just that,
Yeah.
like, the managing agent controls everything, and that goes back down, I suppose, to owner education. Shane, the managing agents take, a lot of flack and a lot of blame for things, where trustees and members kind of absolve themselves from any sort of like responsibility. But again, I'm preaching to the converted. So, that's not really one that we need to discuss. I think we all in agreement on that one. So that's the main one. I mean, there are quite a few that one could go on about, just, yeah, but let's open up to the floor a bit. Let's see if anyone wants to raise anything.
So you're welcome to raise your hand and unmute yourself. Otherwise, you're welcome to put it on the chat. I'm just going to change my view quickly that I'm able to see if anybody is interested in participating. My team, you're also welcome to note if you've got anything.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nicole Bell speaking. I think a common question that I get asked, and a common misconception in a lot of schemes, is that a husband and a wife can't serve as trustees at the same time. And of course, I don't have any personal opinion on this because, of course, I'm not the one living in those schemes. But generally, we find that, yes, of course, if it is a husband and a wife or anyone that's related to each other, they do generally speak or vote with the same mind and mouth. But legally, there is absolutely no restriction against this. And if both the husband and the wife are obviously duly elected and voted in at the AGM, there's nothing wrong with it, So I think that's an interesting point also, just to clarify.
Awesome, thank you. Paul mentioned on the chat the issue of overcrowding. Sorry, I'm not too sure where the background noise is coming from. Overcrowding. So I can speak about the Western Cape bylaws. Michael, maybe you can speak about Gauteng. But in the Western Cape, when we calculate overcrowding in a section, in a body corporate or a premises, children under the age of 10 are considered to be half a person. So it's actually quite easy to overcrowd a unit. So two adults per habitable space. And in terms of the table, a habitable space is a bedroom. So it's 2 persons per bedroom. And then a child under the age of 10 is considered half a person. So that immediately would be overcrowding if you've got a mom and dad and a child or a baby. I remember one of my first overcrowding matters that I ever dealt with. I wrote a letter on the instructions of a trustee to an owner about overcrowding. And they responded with saying that the person that was overcrowding was a 6-month-old baby. I was quite embarrassed that that in case was the situation, but in terms of our Cape Town municipal bylaws, it is in fact overcrowding. But I think in that instance, it's more about the baby crying all hours of the day and night than the actual issue of overcrowding and pressure on resources. Let me see what else is in the chats. A comment about the voting, the CSOS of panel at the CSOS. That's fantastic. Anybody else want to raise any suggestions, any myths, any questions that you might have, any myths that you'd like to bust? You're welcome to raise your hand, unmute yourself, pop it into the chat.
I just saw there's a query about must the EMA be registered with the PPRA? So yes, they must be registered with the PPRA. I think that they fall very much within the ambit of the definition of a property manager. So yes, they must be registered.
Yeah. And
Just have a look what else.
Serena also mentioned that they actually ensure that the agenda is prepared properly to allow for the amendment of the budget. I always like to minute it as a directive to the incoming trustees, but that's also most certainly one way of dealing with it. Okay, Michael, what else did you have on your list?
Let's have a look here. Well, maybe the 10-year plan. The 10-year plan doesn't need to be approved at the age, or necessarily approved at the AGM.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's one that comes up. Then maybe, but finance is not always bad. I see, like especially on the sectional title group, a lot of people sort of berate sort of like finance. I accept the fact that I might be biased, but even in my personal life, I do think that finance used correctly allows a scheme to leverage and add a huge amount of value. So I think that that's certainly a myth that should be sort of disbanded. What else have I got here?
Talking about finance, what about the interim increase? So there's also a myth that the trustees are not allowed to implement a levy increase until the budget is approved at the annual general meeting. But we know that you can, in fact, increase the levies up to 10%.
10%, yeah.
Yeah, and then that can be ratified. Oh, this is a goodie. I'd be interested in hearing your view on this, Michael. When I was a managing agent and we had the budget approved and a levy increase was approved, we used to retrospectively backdate it until the first day of the financial year. What is your view on that? Do you implement the levy increase from the levy statement run after the AGM, or do you backdate it on the next levy statement, backdating it to the beginning of the financial year?
So we use the annualized figures. So we'd adjust the levies to achieve the same end result. So you wouldn't technically backdate it, but you'd approve the budget in line to give you the same levy amount at year end. So I suppose it is a bit, it's not really backdating, but it's just aligning to the levy to the amount needed to give you the same end of year amount. But that's why we, luckily now I'm not a managing agent, but that's why we, with the additional time and the capacity, we like to have like a dedicated budget meet. And then, so even though it's an additional meet, which, managing agents don't like to hear, it does generally, make the AGM a lot smoother because it's already been agreed. And that's often the most sort of contentious issue is about the money. And it also gives the time to like go through and explain and, kind of, just get sort of the buy-in of the owners type of thing. We also do 9.3 budgets. So, if the increase on your 9.3 budget, was within the 10%, we would, go ahead and just automatically put the increase through. Or that was more when I was a managing agent, I suppose. we would recommend to the trustees just to increase, as they are permitted to do, and then you would have the alignment with financial. Yeah, I think a lot of managing agents do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see what else I've got here. I've got
The
Shaheem and David in my office, actually. What else have we got here?
Yeah, guys, come on, participate. Something that I've dealt a lot with in homeowners associations, but almost not at all in bodies corporates, is the discount when it comes to levy payments. So we know that if an owner pays their levies in advance, and that makes me think about the whole payment of levies in advance versus arrears and the raising of interest and all those fun things as well. But do you ever encounter a request for a discount in levies, or is that reserved more to homeowners associations?
Very seldomly in sectional title. I probably on my hand, I could count the number of times we've seen it. And then it is a scheme cost, so you'd need to budget for it effectively. So, but we see it a lot in homeowners, especially on some of the bigger, or more sort of affluent ones where, they're big amounts of money. But then again, that was back in managing agent days as opposed to not. I mean, we've had a lot of requests just, in terms of an EMA related capability for HOAs. So obviously those on, via constitution, you can amend the constitution to allow for an EMA. But, those, the NPA, the non-profits with the MOI, those are a little bit more sort of like tricky. So, we've had to steer away from that. But I think the need is there. I think we did actually ask CSOS for a directive on that. But, needless to say, that hasn't been sort of forthcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pity because I think they have the same challenges,
Yeah.
schemes are schemes, people are people.
100%, 100%. There's even probably more confusion in homeowners associations because they're not guided by, the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act or how we do it.
Yeah.
Talking about HAAs, two myths, especially when the legislation changed, was that the first myth was that the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act applied to homeowners associations. We know that it doesn't. And the biggest thing that came from that was that homeowners associations have to have a maintenance, repair, and replacement plan. So they don't, and they don't have to have a reserve fund either. But it's probably a good idea in a homeowners association to have that. I think a lot of the times they refer to it as like a capital improvement plan or a CapEx budget or something along those lines, which is a good idea. And then another thing that crops up very often is whether or not members are entitled to a refund of levies for whatever reason. And we know that levies are not refundable provided that they've been validly raised and validly recovered. Something else actually that comes up very often, a misconception, is that the seller is liable for a full special levy. We know that used to be the case under the Sectional Titles Act and under the STSMA, that it's done pro rata. So that's quite interesting as well. And then I think one more that comes up that makes me think about it now is, and this is actually a big one. So for my levy collection attorneys, colleagues on there, and of course those that work in the debtors departments and managing agents, and we found that in court that even though you've got an approved budget, even if you've got proper minutes of an annual general meeting showing that the members have approved a budget and approved the levy increase, without the documentation that goes out within 14 days of the annual general meeting and the trustee resolution, that levy increase is not valid. Have you ever dealt with that? I mean, Michael, you've been very actively involved in financial affairs of bodies corporates over the years. Have you had any challenges with that certification and trust?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. So, there's generally sort of like housekeeping issues, but luckily we've managed to get most of them resolved. But that's more back managing agent days.
Yeah. Another thing,
and of course we do everything right now. So
of course, except the voting.
100%. 100%.
Couldn't need to chat to you about that.
Yeah.
Clive made me think of it in his comments about the reserve fund. Another myth is that you simply need to budget 25% minimum in terms of the regulations for the reserve fund, whereas in fact you actually need to budget in accordance with the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan for that forthcoming financial period. And the minimum in terms of the regulations, obviously you can't go below that. Do you often have a lot of misunderstanding with owners when it comes to the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan and the purpose of it? The sort of like reading the reserve fund budget and the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan together?
Yeah, there is. A lot of people don't understand it, and my personal opinion, for whatever it's worth, is I think it's very, very theoretical. You raising sort of this road, and it's a rolling 10 years as well. So in the second year, it shifts out one. So theoretically, it should be updated, but it's very theoretical. In my experience, everyone's only really interested in what happens in the preceding sort of year or two. What happens in year 6, 7, and 8 is quite sort of like academic. So, and that's, back onto our finance business, the majority and that's the majority of our book. It's, clients that have budgeted, they've kind of got a maintenance, repair, and replacement plan to tick the proverbial box. But, in reality, no one really follows it. And, they wait until, they can't wait any longer, and then they do a big project. And it's a budget, it's an estimated amount. So we generally find a body corporate's got they've got a bucket of money, and there's a shortfall because they haven't taken, they've budgeted short, they haven't taken debtors into account, and they've got X but they need Y, and we often sort of just bridge the difference, just to allow it to happen. And I always say to schemes, for just from my perspective, if you're going to get the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan just to tick the proverbial box, I personally think it's a waste of time, because it doesn't, CSOS, I think they're still worried about VBS, so I don't see them coming knocking. But I think what is important is that there is a plan, and if you're going to do it, then really embrace it, because I think the intention is that it's done properly, it's done correctly, the amounts are estimated, it's done professionally, and it's done correctly, because I don't think anyone can argue the logic of it. It certainly does make sense, and I mean, going back onto HOAs, certainly, my experiences with large sort of like HOAs is they do have very extensive, not maintenance plans, but essentially maintenance plans,
Yeah.
where they've got some very qualified sort of outfits running it, and because the numbers are huge,
Yeah.
talking hundreds of millions. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not a yeah. So I think the logic is correct, but I think if people are just doing it to tick the proverbial, I think it's a waste of money then, because it adds
100%.
no value. Then you might as well just default to the minimum amounts to make yourself compliant, and life goes on. But it's difficult for an MA, because they're not paid to manage those plans. And there is a gap there, because we get the plans and then it kind of falls through. The clients expect the managing agent to manage those plans, and it's not their responsibility. It's the trustees' responsibility.
Yeah.
And the trustees either don't know, don't care, and it kind of then falls through the cracks, and it's not sort of like actively managed.
Yeah.
But again, if schemes paid 3, 4, 500 rand a unit, they could have people managing them in the managing agent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's not get into that discussion. We've got a different
Mm.
meeting coming up about the managing agent fees. Marion raised a good point. She says that many people believe that you can budget for your improvements in terms of the 10-year maintenance, repair, and replacement plan and the reserve fund. Yes, that does come up very often. I think a lot of people use the reserve fund as a savings account for the body corporates, and if there's an unexpected thing that pops up or something that is nice to have and there's more money in the reserve fund, they tend to take it from there. Whereas the reserve fund literally is to save for the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan. And the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan only contains the existing common property infrastructure. So not the camera system that you would like to have, but rather the camera system that you do have. Something else that happens often as well is that very minor items are included in the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan, whereas the Act specifically says major capital items need to be in that. Michael, have you dealt with many schemes that have had their managing agent or their trustees prepare the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan? Or are you of the belief that that needs to be professionally prepared along with the liability that goes with that?
I personally think that should be, yeah, I personally think it should be professionally done, with the requisite sort of skill set. But I mean, I've seen trustees, sort of work on a plan that's pretty decent, in inverted commas. So, yeah, there's no, they generally then become a bit sort of penny wise, pound foolish, in terms of, then going to a kind of a bucky builder to do it. So to me, that's a waste of money. But yeah, I suppose I don't have a firm answer, but the majority of schemes that we see, they are done externally, professionally, and those same parties are then involved on kind of assisting on the major works, major sort of redick projects, which happen around about, sort of generally sort of every 7 to 10 years, so they kind of assist in the lead up to it. And then, if they're doing it every year, one gets a cost saving because it's just redoing an existing plan. And it's quite nice to be able to call upon those parties to give input even on menial, sort of maintenance works, just sort of advice and some sort of like guidance, which then doesn't, wouldn't typically sort of attract a cost. I think it's dangerous for trustees to do it personally. Just they have full-time jobs, and I think it kind of like blurs the line, and they don't understand the liability that they actually take on. So I'd caution against it, but certainly one does see it. Certainly not in our sort of role as an EMA. We would get it done externally. And, but a lot of what comes onto us, interestingly enough, on the EMA side are very well managed schemes. And then your challenge schemes, that the missing middle, you get one or two, but the majority fall into the former categories. Just, those very well run schemes where the trust, that chairman, it's that one person that really gives a lot more than anyone can reasonably expect, is just cut full and wants out, and just knows there's no one to hand over to. So we get a lot of that, and they are equally difficult because they micromanage us,
Yeah.
until they're comfortable that we know what we're doing. And then obviously your more challenge schemes where there's a, combination of financial challenges, backlog maintenance, and then it's reworking budgets and, and everything that goes with it, and navigating out of the proverbial financial quagmire. But it's,
I like that.
quagmire. I love that word.
Fantastic. Nicole, are you going to wrap up for us?
I'm not. I'm actually just going to add my 10 cents about
Go
that
for it.
question. From coming as an owner in a sectional title scheme where it was so soon after the whole MR&R plans had come out, or the legislation had come out about that, and the scheme didn't get it professionally done. The trustees did it. And they went about putting painting as an line item before waterproofing
Oh, no.
as a line item.
Yeah.
So year 1 or 2 came up and it was time to paint. And then all of a sudden the trustees needed to raise a special levy to get the waterproofing done because it wasn't in the plan for that year.
In the right order. Yeah. Shows you what.
Yeah, they put it in the wrong order. So my personal experience with it is just get a professional to do it. It's silly things like that. Like logically, obviously you need to waterproof before you paint. But it could be outside the realm of somebody's experience or understanding. And that's a very obvious example, but there could be things that are hidden that are not that obvious.
Yeah.
So my opinion would be just get it professionally done, even if it's just for the first 10-year plan, and then you can sort of judge and wiggle around from there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
well, something else that you raised that was pertinent there is raising a special levy. So a lot of people were of the mistaken belief that if you have a maintenance, repair, and replacement plan and a reserve fund, that you're never going to have to raise a special levy again. But that's not the case. And a lot of bodies corporates actually had to raise special levies simply to fund their maintenance, repair, and replacement plans. Zerlinda commented or asked the question, if there are surplus funds in the admin fund, could owners decide at the AGM to move these funds over to the reserve fund? Michael, your comments on that?
So we typically run all our schemes with 3 accounts, and so we would have our maintenance, repair, and replacement plan, like our proper reserve account, which would be theoretically linked to your plan, and then we would have an administrative fund, or just like a conventional savings account that would accumulate your surpluses, and that's a nice one for improvements. If we've got additional monies type of thing. So we wouldn't usually transfer it through. I mean, there are reserves in any event, but we would leave them in that sort of like third account, and there shouldn't be any fees for that account if you're using a CCM platform type of thing. They're all quite sort of like cost effective. So I would just leave it there and accumulate those, and then either to subsidize the budget the following year or for improvements.
100%. 100%. Because the danger of putting everything into the reserve fund is that you can then only get it out in terms of.
Exactly.
When the requirement, as Nicole said, when the requirement came out for the reserve fund, a lot of schemes were literally just relabeling their savings accounts as reserve funds, which then meant that they were limited in what they could actually use those funds for, and suddenly had to raise special levies for other matters, even though they had a nice healthy reserve fund. Yeah, yeah. Michael, any closing words for our attendees?
No, not really. Just, yeah, we persevere. For
Yeah,
very little thanks at times, eh? So,
yeah, 100%. Don't you want to use the
no.
opportunity just to tell everyone a little bit more about the service offerings of ZDFin and ZTech, like where you started, where you've ended up over the last 5 years?
Yeah, she's well, it has been a very interesting journey. We had initially
Whirlwind.
only wanted to do the finance, which I thought was easier, and less work, but we fortuitously got into the EMA side, which has, grown exponentially and become one of our biggest sort of like service offerings. I think most people know that we purchased Propel at the end of last year. So that's been keeping us exceptionally busy, sort of, going through that book and trying to rehabilitate it, undoing quite a few of their, well, undoing most of their products actually, and migrating it across to the way that we're doing it. And yeah, so we've become, the finance has grown exponentially as well as the EMA. So yeah, we're in a good space. We've been lucky and we've done well. So I'm very thankful for that and for the amazing partners, in the industry like yourselves and, everyone attending the call. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michael. Aaron, you've got your hand raised. Aaron, you can just unmute yourself. I think Aaron did pop in the chat. He said that the STA provided for only 2 bank accounts. So it speaks about separate bank accounts and different bank accounts for the reserve and the administrative fund, but not necessarily limiting it to 2. I know sometimes some schemes have up to 4 more bank accounts as well, depending on the different banks and the different interest rates and all those fun things. But it seems from getting the topic idea to the actual presentation thereof that there is a lot of misconceptions in the community scheme space. I hope that we've been able to debunk some myths. And if you've got any other comments or any other suggestions, you're more than welcome to pop us a mail and reach out to us and we can have a chat. And then until next time, Michael, thank you so much for you and your team. I trust that the next 50 years will be incredibly successful and blessed. And thank you for everything that you do for the industry, and thank you for everything that you do for our TVDM family. It's so good to work with you in the industry. It is such a breath of fresh air to have somebody that is as down to earth and as honest as what you are. So may you go from strength to strength in your team as well. And may you continually be supported by your exceptionally strong and beautiful wife, Nicola. And I'm sure that's without you would just be
Well,
cycling.
she's in charge these days.
Exactly, as she should be.
She's in charge, overreaching herself.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Have a good
Thanks,
week.
everyone. Thanks, Zerlinda. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, cheers, guys.